Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you all. Today we have Mr. Brian Alonzo, and he's going to be speaking to us in regards to meteorology and how he came into that role, what education path he took, what additional jobs helped him prepare for this role, as well as any additional training that he's gone through. He'll also share with us any highs and any lows that he has within his daily work routine. How has COVID-19 impacted his daily um, operations there in the station, as well as any words of advice he'd like to give to high school students who seek to become a meteorologist. I ask that you please mute all your lines. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Thank you so much, Brian, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Of course, I'm very honored to be here with you all and, of course, ask questions. I know usually there's always a lot of questions, especially when it comes to weather and broadcasting. And so I'm very happy to be here. And of course, we'll talk about a lot of things that I've done to get where I'm at today. So let's talk about that. So officially, my name is Brian Alonzo. I'm the chief meteorologist for KAVU TV. At the same time, we are with part of what we call the Victoria Television Group. And so what's kind of unique here in Victoria is we kind of have all of our stations all together in one building. So we have an ABC affiliate, an NBC affiliate. We have our Fox or CBS. We have our Spanish stations all housed together in one building. So we're part of the television group, but we are owned by Morgan Murphy Media. It's a very small company here that has several stations across the country here. And so I've been great to join this company. I started officially at the beginning of March. And literally things have been topsy-turvy, of course, with the pandemic going on. Things were kind of normal for the first 2 weeks. And then after that, things just went in a completely different direction. And I was, let's just say, it's been something new. It's been kind of a interesting experience. I just want to talk about, how I kind of got to this point and throughout my career. Well, I've always been fascinated with weather, and you'll often hear that from other meteorologists that are across the country that are just not necessarily in broadcasting, but also maybe doing private sector, maybe doing like National Weather Service, or maybe working for a private company. One of the things is that that we all kind of share is that just the passion for weather. And I always like to share this story where I kind of really got the passion for it was every couple of weekends when I would go with my dad, he would take us to some property that my grandparents had owned up in the hill country, Texas hill country, out near Canyon Lake, which is just west of New Braunfels, north of San Antonio. And there would be some days where we would have some general thunderstorms moving on through. Sometimes you'd have severe thunderstorms, and because we're out in the country, and this is back in the 80s when I was born, so this is a long time ago, we'd often lose power, and we lose power for like 6 hours. And so when you're out in the hill country, there's not much to do except just watch the storms, and you see the lightning and all that. To me was always fascinating. One of the other things that would be fascinating was before those storms would arrive, the local TV meteorologists would get on the air and they would show the radar, and you see the little sweep kind of doing the little 360 and showing the radar. I used to always find that fascinating. I don't know why, but I love that. And of course, even to this day, sometimes I turn on those sweeps every once in a while, and I'm like, gosh, I missed that. But anyways, so I really got a real passion for that. And ever since I was a kid, I just loved watching the local meteorologists on TV, and I always thought that was very fascinating. And as I got older, I said, maybe this is something I might want to do. So once I got to high school, I said, yeah, I think I could do this in college. So I finished high school, and then I had to decide, okay, we're going to college. Where are we going to go? And so I'm from San Antonio. I decided to, and I went to a private high school. If I went to the private university that was within the what they call the brain power connection with the University of Incarnate I had an opportunity to do that. But the only problem is they didn't have a meteorology program. And so I said, well, and I had to declare a major. So I said, well, why don't we, stick to media. So I started doing communication arts as at the time it was my major. So that was back in 2001. And let me tell you, in 2001, guess what happened in September? We had 9/11. And so that was a surreal experience to be in college that first semester and go through that whole thing. And of course, being at the time a major in communication arts. So we kind of analyzed a lot of the media coverage and everything. And like I said, and of course that just shocked the country. And so a lot of things went on during that time. And so within about I did 2 years there, studying communications. I decided, you know what, let's go ahead and go for it. Let's change my major to meteorology. And the nearest schools that were around is Texas A&M. There was also Texas Tech up in Lubbock. But some part of me decided, you know what, I want to go to Oklahoma. And the reason what got me to Oklahoma was in 2003, May of that year, a big tornado went through the Oklahoma City metro area. And I said, you know what, I think I want to go up there. I was watching live coverage of how the TV stations were doing, tracking that big storm moving through. And I decided, you know what, I want to go to Oklahoma. So I went to the University of Oklahoma for 2 years, got accepted, majored in meteorology there for a couple of years. And I was also doing almost essentially a double major with journalism. And so I was there for 2 years. I lived in Norman for 1 year, and I lived in Oklahoma City for another year. And after Oklahoma City, I decided to move back to San Antonio when I found out the old university where I studied communication arts actually started a meteorology program. I'm like, hey, I can study meteorology there. I can be closer to home. I can, be closer to friends and family. I said, so let's go ahead and do it. So I left Oklahoma, and while attending the University of Incarnate Word for my meteorology program, I was lucky enough to get a job with the local ABC affiliate, and as a weather producer. So while I was going to school for meteorology, I was working as a weather producer at the ABC station KSAT 12. And so I was very fortunate on that aspect. But the one thing also too that I thought was great was I was able to finish and get my meteorology degree. I'm the very first person to get a bachelor's of science in meteorology from the University of Incarnate Word, the very first person. And so I'm very honored by that. And so after I finished college, I continued to stay at KSAT, and I decided to still stay behind the scenes. I stayed there as a weather producer for 10 years. And let me tell you, and this was all going through a recession. I was very fortunate to still have my job when a lot of people were losing their jobs around 2007, 2008 timeframe, something like that. And my station was still, I was fortunate to where I could still attend weather conferences and stuff like that. And some people even came up to me and were like, hey, Brian, what show do you do? What show do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm not an on-air meteorologist. I said, I'm behind the scenes. And they were like, one person told me, he goes, well, don't take this the wrong way, but you still have a job. And I'm like, yeah. I said, I'm very fortunate. I work for a great company, and I have great management. And so I was very fortunate at that particular time. So after the 10 years in 2006, I said, you know what? I wanted to do a little bit more with my career. I said, let's finally give a stab at being an on-air personality. So I went ahead and started applying at various TV stations across the state. I really wanted to stay in Texas. I didn't want to go to the Northeast. Or someplace up north. Why? Because I hate the cold. I'm not a big fan of winter weather. So I wanted to stay fairly close to home. And so I wanted to stay in Texas. And so I started applying several places. And eventually KETK in Tyler, Texas, called me and said, or contacted me. I contacted them, and then they called me back and said, hey, Brian, come up for an interview. So went into the interview. They liked me, and I was hired as the weekend meteorologist back in August of 2006, or right? 2016, excuse me. And so I was there for the past 3 years, and just recently, late last year, I decided, you know what, I wanted to come back to the San Antonio area, and some part of me was like, well, I've done the TV gig thing for a while, for the past 3 years. It's like, okay, that was on my bucket list. I did it. So I was like, well, what do I want to do next? Do I want to still continue to be in broadcasting, or do I want to maybe go in a different direction? And so I kind of looked around, deciding what I wanted to do. And, I had an opportunity. I found that KAVU was hiring. And so I applied, and here we are. Here we are as the chief meteorologist. So it's been pretty fascinating here. But my career, the one thing I always is kind of different from, if you were to talk to other broadcast meteorologists across the country, mine is kind of a little bit unique. The reason why is, and there's some things that I kind of neglected to mention, and I'm going to kind of go back to this, is that I kind of worked my way up in broadcasting here. When I was studying communication arts at the University of Colorado Word, I was able to get an internship at the local NBC affiliate. So that's when I really learned how to use the weather system. I really learned a lot about broadcasting. Did that for a semester. And then, of course, I moved over to Oklahoma. And while I was in Oklahoma, I was able to get a job at the ABC affiliate in Oklahoma City, KOCO TV, as a what they call an operation technician, essentially production, where I was able to run audio for the newscast. I was also running teleprompter, and we had cameras. We had robotic cameras, so only one person needed to be in the studio. So I found that pretty fascinating. But the one thing that I found that was really cool was the chief meteorologist there. His name was Rick Mitchell, and he had. I had asked him, I said, hey, Rick, I know some things on the weather system, because it was the same one that I used back in San Antonio. I said, can I show you a couple of things? Can I make some maps? And he's like, yeah, Brian, have at it. And so I made some maps for them. So whenever there was severe weather, if I was off, I would either go into the station and help out the local meteorologist, or I would go out with a photog and a photojournalist or a reporter and go out storm chasing. I did that a couple of times, and let me tell you, it was fascinating to be part of that. And I really enjoyed it. I wish I could have done it a little bit more. I only went 2 times, but I wish I could have done it more, had my studies allowed. But after that, like I said, so I worked my way from an intern to production, and then I was weather producer behind the scenes and news when I got to KSAT, and then I moved to finally on air. So that was kind of a little bit more of a unique perspective from my end, where there was, I actually went through all of that to get to kind of where I am today. So I really understand a little bit more than other broadcast meteorologists what it takes to do things behind the scenes. So I really am a little bit more appreciative of, and I'm not saying that other meteorologists aren't appreciative, but I really am even more so appreciative of, especially of people behind the scenes, our production staff, our other producers, because I know the stress that they have to go through to get a lot of things on the air. So right now, talking about my level of training, like I said, I've got my degree in meteorology. And so you have to go to school at least 4 years. I went a little bit longer, like I said, because I was studying communication arts, and then I've switched over to meteorology. So I went to school for a little bit longer than I should have been. But I can tell you that one of the other things that you can do more is just try to get out there and with what you can, and try to learn as much as you can. That's always important. And one of the things about, question that a lot of people kind of ask me is like, how do I kind of get started? And first thing I always tell when I was a supervisor for the interns at KSAT, I would always tell people that you're doing the right thing. Internship, but don't do one internship, do multiple internships, because not one TV station operates exactly the same, because they're all different. Even though we're in the same business, you have different companies and different ownership groups who kind of do things differently. So that's the one thing you always got to keep an open mind. But the one thing I always tell people is, if you ever get into this business, not just an on-air personality, but also behind the scenes, is you got to have some pretty thick skin. You got to really roll with the punches, because you know what? Sometimes you're never gonna please everybody. In fact, I've only been here just a couple of months, and already some people are telling me what they like, they don't like. A lot of people are very positive. They've told me that they love a lot of the things that I'm doing. But of course, you get a couple of people saying, "Hey, I don't want to see this. Why aren't you doing this?" And because I guess the previous chief meteorologist used to do some things, and maybe I'm kind of changing it up just a little bit here at the station. As far as what I do on a day-to-day basis, what I do is I usually get in at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We have what we call an editorial meeting with management as well as other reporters, and we kind of talk about what the stories are for the day. And then I usually chime in with what's going to be happening with the weather forecast. If there's going to be an active severe weather event, we make sure we kind of outline some of that. But normally what I like to do here that I don't think was done before was I like to email the newsroom and saying, hey, this is what we're going to see. This is the timing. This is how everything's going to kind of play out. And I kind of throw in some images just so everybody's aware. And I also send that out to our general manager. I send it to our people in our master control, and just make sure everybody's kind of in the know about what's going on, and also send it to the newsroom. One thing that I really most enjoy about my job is that I get a chance to, I'm a people person. I get the chance to get out, meet people. In fact, a couple of people here in my neighborhood were doing lawn maintenance, and one of them was like, "Hey, it's the weatherman," and so yeah, it's like, "Hey, how you doing? Okay, stay cool and hydrated," and so yeah, like I said, it's great that I love talking with people and love talking about weather, and it's just been fascinating. And so that's the one perk about this job. And of course, I work with great people, and throughout my career, I've been in the business like 15, 16 years now. I'm very fortunate to have worked with a lot of great people in this business, and some of them I can still look to guidance because they've been in the business a lot longer than I have, and some of these people even look to me for some guidance that haven't been in the business that long. So I always appreciate that. As far as academic knowledge for if you ever considered this, doing this as a career, science and math. Those are the two big things that are really important. Now, if you decide to take the broadcasting aspect, you may want to take a little bit of communications courses. I'll be quite honest. So when I took the communication arts in San Antonio, so I do have a minor in comm arts. So that's pretty cool. As far as I know, I saw somebody had asked a question about extracurricular activities. One of the things that I did when I was before I moved to Oklahoma was actually I take that back. It was after, when I was still at KSAT. I became president of the South Central Texas chapter of the American Meteorological Society National Weather Association. That's a tongue twister. You have to think about that. Yeah, we had a little chapter, and it combined both San Antonio and Austin areas. And so one year I became president of that. And so that was a very fun experience as well. I got a chance to meet people that are just enthusiastic about weather, and from both the San Antonio and Austin areas. And I thought that was just one of the things that you just kind of like, wow, that's great, Now, the one point is, with COVID-19, exactly how have things changed at the station? Well, like I said, my first 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, were pretty much normal, standard normal. But then, corporate said, hey, we got to take care of our people, and we need to do some social distancing. And so that's when we decided, okay, less people in the building. So right now, a lot of people are working from home, and then we had set up an option for me, had I wanted to do weather from here, right here in my home. And so we are set for that. So the station invested in some money where I can remotely log into our weather systems. And so that's been great, but we never had to use it. And so, like I said, if there's an opportunity, if we have to, let's say the pandemic gets worse again for whatever reason, I can do weather from here. No, not a problem. But I will admit that, me being still the new employee, I miss seeing everybody on a day-to-day basis, but we're slowly starting to get people back in, very, very slowly. We're going to take things very slow, and I appreciate the company doing that, and I appreciate them looking out for us. So I don't officially have any props or anything like that, but I wanted to kind of just leave the remaining time here for questions. that you might have. Hopefully I can see some of those. So please go ahead and answer. I know, like I said, I did see a question about extracurricular activities. If you can do extracurricular activities, especially now, if you're getting into college, because that helps to just beef up your resume, and internships, because internships typically want to see that. What have you done? Like I said, I'm always a big proponent of internships. I highly, highly recommend them. And even if you can, some of these companies nowadays, especially broadcast companies, will actually start to pay their interns. So that could be a little bit more of an added incentive there for you to work a little bit harder to try to get at that. But like I said, the one thing is you definitely want to try to get those internships.
Brian, there was other questions here, and
Okay.
it says, what soft skills would one need to become a meteorologist?
Well, the one thing is that, and I'll be honest, it depends what you want to do. Now, if you want to go into like National Weather Service, you kind of really hit those sciences hard, physics, calculus. You got to do really a whole lot of math. Um, and a lot of thermodynamics. You got to go through all these other science courses. Whereas broadcast meteorology is not really strict on all of that, the higher level, but the basic levels. So you really still have to continue to get the meteorology degree. I know there's some colleges that offer like a certification in meteorology. You could get by with that. But I can tell you, it's just better just to go straight with the meteorology, so you get a better understanding of the whole concept of it, rather than just kind of nitpicking at certain little things. So that's my advice there.
Another question that's on the panel, it says, if a student is diagnosed with a disability, are there modifications that could be implemented to allow them to become a meteorologist?
I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't doubt it. As far as regular general meteorology, I'm not sure what exactly could be out there, but I feel like anybody with disabilities can still do it. Can still do a lot of. If you can find a college that can accommodate your needs, yes, I think that'd be great. That they can specialize, maybe some special teachings. I know that my University of Incarnate Word, did some things for some of those folks, and that was great. That they helped out a lot.
What keywords or advice would you give to a high school student in general? How to stay on path, how to stay on point and not lose focus of the target?
Well, I got to tell you, one of the things that the one thing I neglect to mention is that it's been tough for me, especially like I said, because I wasn't sure exactly. I knew where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be an on-air meteorologist since really I was a kid, but the route that I took was rather long. And but the one thing is, I kept telling myself, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Even in the last maybe 2 years of me being at University of Incarnate Word, before I got my meteorology degree, I guess I got senioritis. And I just felt like throwing in the towel and being like, I'm done with school. I can't do this anymore. But I kept telling myself that if I were to leave college, I may not come back. I may not come back, and it may not be for several years. I was already I already had a good job, like I said, with KSAT. But something told me, you know what? No, let's just keep on chugging along. And I did that, and I still stayed in school. I got my degree, and like I said, and then eventually, like I said, I decided to do eventually move to on air. And let me tell you, I didn't get hired, or even got interviews at a lot of places I applied for. I applied in San Angelo, I applied in Midland, I applied in Waco, I applied the Rio Grande Valley, and all these places that I applied for, I just got completely shut down. And some of the places I did go do interviews with, they were like, Brian, we want you. And then I never heard back. So my best advice is, I want to give to high school students is, if you have a dream, don't give up. Seriously. I am a proponent that, things get tough, and things may not go your way. You may have a goal set in mind, but you may get knocked down several times. just get back up and keep on going, because that's the best advice I can give to anybody. And I'm living proof of that here, where, I started out low on the totem pole, and now here I am, chief meteorologist at a great TV station in Victoria.
Thank you so much, Brian. One other question we have here is, how would somebody get hired at NOAA? For those who don't know what NOAA stands for, it's the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration.
Well, it depends what a position you're applying for. I even applied for a couple of jobs with them before getting this job. Like I said, they've got certain criteria. A lot of the jobs that they have are kind of internal, but if you're an external candidate coming from outside NOAA and the government, they have certain requirements and a lot of schooling. And I could give you some of the schooling, that some of the things that they were requiring was, like, you had to have 6 to 12 hours of atmospheric science, and then you had to have, like I said, thermodynamics, you had to have the physics, you had to have the calculus, you had to have the geometry, and like I said, I mean, a lot of science. I mean, it was like, oh my goodness. And some of them, I'll be quite honest, I barely qualified for. So that's why I said, stick with the schooling. If you really want to go work for the government, you really have to take these higher level end courses. It's a tough road, especially for college, but I'm a firm believer that it pays off in the end. You get your degree, you put in all the hard work in college, and it'll pay off in the long run, especially if you decide to do a long-term career with the government and NOAA.
In saying that, for NOAA, would they require security clearance? And how important is it that kids keep their digital footprint clean and just adhere to proper social media etiquette?
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the new things that I keep telling interns is, watch what you post on social media, because that could come back and bite you in the butt here, because it could follow you. This stuff follows you all over the place. And, you think people may not see it. You may have your accounts locked. Yeah, that helps to a certain extent. But to be quite honest, they can find it. I feel like, or people can find information about you some way, somehow. And so that's what sometimes even employers look at nowadays, is looking at your social media feed. And one of the things is, I have a Twitter account that I've just pretty much just keep it just strictly weather. I don't try to get in the political realm or any of that nature, because of course it can get contentious and stuff like that. And so you just got to kind of watch what you say, especially on social media. But as far as like security clearances, to your first part of your question, yeah, the government informed me when I was applying for some of these jobs, yeah, they do require that you have a clean record for the most part. And if you don't, then you may have to explain yourself as to why you don't, if you've been stopped by the police or anything like that, and there's records of that. But yeah, so just try to do your best to be a good citizen, and be thoughtful, and don't be reckless with the thoughts, especially like I said on social media, or the pictures. Sometimes those photos, I got to tell you folks, can come back and get you. And so if you're at parties and whatnot, and maybe there's a little bit too much of alcohol or something like that, you don't want that to follow you and ruin part of your career. Because if you're going through school, you're working already hard to get a good job, but it could end for some people, depending on the severity of what's going on. So yeah, just watch out.
Would you recommend students participating in organizations such as Toastmasters, and how helpful would that be for their career?
I've never heard of Toastmasters. Do you know? Well, I've never heard of that. What do they specialize in?
Public speaking, ad lib speaking, just the professionalism within a speaking role.
Oh, well, yeah. I just say, just keep practicing and try to join. Like I said, I feel like the best way you can learn about doing that is don't be shy and join some organizations. like I said, I did, join you American Meteorological Society, National Weather Association. This is where you kind of network, attend conferences. That's the other thing that I really want to highly recommend. Attend conferences, network. That's exactly the one thing that I was grateful for when I was at KSAT, was that my boss would send me to 2 or 3 conferences a year, all over the country. So when I was, he wanted me to really go to the American Meteorological Society's weather conferences. So every year the broadcasters were, in various cities. So one year I was in Nashville. I went to Boston. I'd never been up to the Northeast before. I went to Portland, Oregon. So I got a chance to see much of the country, and I got a chance to meet a lot of great people. And at the same time, I consider them, many of them, friends. They don't even live here in Texas. They live in other parts of the country. But, sometimes we'll all gather around. And hopefully now that I'm back here in Victoria and South Texas, that I'll be able to attend more weather conferences, especially in this area, because there are a lot of good conferences. In fact, I missed a good one a couple of weeks ago, the National Tropical Hurricane Conference. They canceled that one because of the pandemic, but I like going to that. That's usually in South Padre, and you hear from a lot of great speakers specializing in hurricanes. And so that's one thing that I highly recommend you do, is just attend weather conference and network.
Thank you so much, Brian, for all that great information. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to have addressed on the chat panel? With that being said, I appreciate you all for logging in. Thank you, Brian, for connecting with us. We appreciate everyone's time. We hope you all stay safe and stay healthy.
Absolutely. And I just want to finish. I know later on this afternoon, my colleague Sean Coffey's doing another one. I believe he's doing the 1 o'clock time frame. And he'll actually be kind of touring the station. He'll be at the station and kind of walking around, kind of showing you some things. You may even see me. I'm supposed to go in a little bit early as well. So we could show you a little bit of the Weather Center and the studio. So be sure to join about that time. I think it's 1 o'clock that he's got.
Thank you so much. We look forward to that. And if anyone does have any questions that they think of later in the future, please feel free to email me and I'll forward them along to Brian. Thank you all again.
Appreciate it.